Hello students, welcome to this series on advertising and sales promotion. Today we are going to study types of advertising. In this we will cover the various forms of advertising and the impact on the consumers. How advertising serves different market segments becomes very important according to the cost, the budget and the target audiences. Now before taking advertising as a subject, let's see what J.F. Richards has said. Creative without strategy is called an art. Creative with strategy is called an advertising. Advertising is basically a strategy which caters to the audiences in a defined way. The advertising is a type of a concept which genuinely is action oriented. According to Brian Phillox, if commerce is the engine of our economy, then advertising is the spark. Responsible advertisers are the drivers who keep us on the right track, leading to the richer and more benevolent society. So in any case, advertising as a strategy has to serve the society so as to create people and ads which genuinely have better standards of living and better ideas to grow. Advertising basically has to nourish the human consumption. According to Winston Churchill, advertising nourishes the consumer power of the man. It sets up before the man the goal of a better home, better clothing, better food for himself and his family. It spurs the individual exertion and a greater production. This is important because genuinely advertising builds the human vision. The continuous impact of advertising on human life has given a kind of a maturity to deal with the products and a way of learning to interact with the products. According to a source, the Interactive Advertising Bureau, in 2007, the continuous robust growth of the industry indicates that marketers increasingly understand and appreciate the benefits of interactive advertising. Marketers, large and small, have come to accept the digital media as the fulcrum of any advertising and marketing strategy. So, advertising is changing with the phase and the form of the society. As modernization is increasing, the technological upgradation is happening, and this is putting a great pressure on the human society. The forms of advertising from print to broadcasting to have come to a form of interactive advertising where digital media has become important. Here the websites and the internet have dominated the human life. Even the mobiles have become interactive, where the kind of the advertising is shaping the new vision for the society. Advertising is the greatest form of the art in the 20th century which has built the human emotions in a creative way. It is a kind of a heritage of life carried to the generations where the ways of life and the norms of living are dictated. According to David, as the precious as life itself, a heritage of individual freedom, a man's legacy is genuinely a kind of a God gifted which is displayed by advertising. Advertising is a force which shapes the human emotions. According to Leo Arthron, advertising is the lubricant for the free enterprise system, where business systems are built up in such a way that the individual freedom and expressions becomes important. Advertising is a kind of a salesmanship, where you produce the goods at mass level. It is difficult to communicate face to face, so we resort onto media to interact with people. Now mobiles and the internet have shaped the human society. The impact is there which is changing the dimensions and the forms and the types of advertising. The Interactive Advertising Bureau says the ability of mobile device to provide instant gratification, whether communication, information or entertainment, whenever or whoever is consuming, happens to empower both the advertisers and the consumers and tries to create a strong likelihood that mobile communication devices will become the next greatest advertising media. This basically establishes a contact where a kind of interaction and exchange of information takes place on the instant basis. According to the Rosa Reeves, they establish the contact with the subconscious of the consumer's below and the word level. They do this with the visual symbols instead of words. They communicate faster. They are more direct. There is no work, no mental effort. The sole purpose is to create an impact at the mental level where the interaction takes place. Advertising is the life of all trade and all businesses. Now when we discuss the types and forms of advertising, we basically have to resort onto the kind of the purpose and the objective of what the target audiences need. The advertising as a tool of sales promotion basically tries to decide the kind of the strategy. It is the kind of decisions taken and the kind of the legal issues discussed before you take the advertising to the market. The kind of the promotion issues become important according to the budget and the cost involved. The basic aim and the objective of advertising as a type and a form is to create a kind of awareness, interest, evaluation and then basically help the consumers to take decisions where the product is confirmed according to their standards in terms of acceptance. Now let's see this chart, which basically is the core of the lecture, which decides what are the basic types of advertising. We have two types broadly classified as institutional advertising and product advertising. The product advertising is again broken into pioneering advertising, competitive advertising, reminder advertising. The competitive advertising is again direct, indirect and comparative. Now see, when we talk about institutional advertising, this basically relates to the kind of the institutions at corporate level where the advertising genuinely caters to the institutional marketing and a collaboration happens at a higher level. See, genuinely when a person is traveling in airlines, for example, he tries to have a cup of tea. He is served with Tata or Tetley tea. So this is a kind of an institutional marketing where a kind of a lifelong contract is there between the airlines company and the corporate sector so as to cater to the services which are a kind of a contract where you happen to travel but the institution is promoted on the airways. But when the product advertising is taken, we genuinely try to deal with the consumers on the basis where we try to be competitive or we try to build a kind of a status of reminder. Now the pioneering advertising basically has a kind of a basic impact which tries to connect the pioneer impact. Pioneer are the foremost or the most important issues which genuinely take the basic strategic forums. When we talk about the kind of the concept related to comparative advertising, we try to compare two products, but here the kind of the brand and the issue of the other product is not disclosed, and you try to compare the product with the kind of the standards prevalent to the society. The reminder advertising basically tries to recall and enhance the values where the consumers can genuinely relate to the kind of the basic issues of the advertising. The direct advertising is the direct mail advertising. The indirect advertising is through the kind of the sales promotion program taken, that is through the coupons or through the indirect approach where you try to aid a kind of a sponsorship in terms related to educational institutes where the banks play an important role in giving credit or a kind of a institutional credit given for the car loans. There are many forms where you indirectly promote the organization in terms when the product becomes supplementary. Comparative advertising has a kind of an impact when comparisons are done on fair basis. So these basically forms of advertising relate to the competitive aspects where the competition is intense and any kind of supplementary or the kind of the addition of the products would enhance the value in terms to remember the audiences about the usage of the product. Institutional advertising basically connects divisions of the company. It basically sheds a kind of a favorable light for the institution and advocates the causes and the ideas. We have shown you over here the kind of the basic model which impacts the kind of the audiences at the institutional level. The institutional advertising is built up on the basis of the social causes taken, which genuinely portray the kind of the issue related to the corporate social responsibility of the organization. The social responsibility of the organization displays the kind of the concern and the kind of the problems related to the society. These concerns basically impact the human society to perceive the organization for which the cause is being served. Now we have the interactive advertising media where the kinds of the advertising basically relate to the institutional, pioneering, competitive and reminder. Here we take the help of the digital media to build a kind of an interaction. Then we have to coordinate the efforts in terms with the corporative relationships with the various parameters and the actors which are happening in the market. The key issues relate to these kinds of advertising basically relate to the advertising allowances in terms of the cost and the budget, the cooperative endeavors and the collaborations happening into the market. It is the integrated communication systems and the ethical concerns related to the advertisements. The vertical corporation basically helps to enhance the value of the product which happens through the distribution channel. The best medium to choose the message is the kind of the objective in terms what is the promotion related to, what is the characteristics of the market and what are the funds available. It is the nature of media which will allow you to shape the kind of the objectives and the kind and the form of advertising to be taken to the market. The emphasis on targeting is important because the key issues related to targeting enhance the value in terms to have an impact in terms of direct contact. It is generally to have a kind of a traditional media which is generally more focused, and you genuinely can utilize the specialized media with the special audiences. This is the kind of the funds which is invested makes important to choose the target audiences. Now, the internet advertising is important because sometimes it happens that there are products which genuinely the customers want to interact on personalized basis and where the services become important, and to have this kind of advertising and a form of advertising enhances the company's value. The key issues related to internet advertising basically relate to the kind of the direct response built up as desired by the audiences. It is some sites are better targeted to the specialized group of people. The search aids basically relates to the consumer's perception in terms to the keywords. The behavioral targeting becomes important where the behavior related to the consumer is focused. It is the kind of the pay for the performance in terms where the product generally performs and gives you a kind of a turnover, and then only the payments are done. The need to maintain the interest of the audiences becomes important, and to build a kind of a direct contact in terms to enhance the relational aspect is genuinely important. Taking hold on the advertising through the internet is the core issue of the today's and the modern era. Now, genuinely when these issues are related to any type of advertising, whether it is on the print media or on the internet, or if you are doing a comparative advertising or genuinely taking an institutional advertising, the basic reason is we have to build a kind of a brand and an image. So, we have to avoid the unfair practices. How can the unfair practices should be avoided? This is the government has to play an important role. The FTC controls in terms of the councils, where the Federal Advertising Council has to control the quality of the ads. The standards genuinely are changing, but still we have to support the basic fair cause in terms to build up the society in a better way. Now, the kind of the objectives which define the impact of the advertising on the society relate to the identification in terms what are the elements put up to build up the ads. It is the basic forms of other communication media which are supporting advertising. It is to explain how advertising builds up the basic human communication and discusses the kind of the strategy related to advertising. Now, see, the form and the type of the advertising depends on the kind of the market available with you. The total market consists of two aspects. You have consumer markets and industrial markets. Here we have shown you in this model where the total market of the business is divided into two aspects. The consumer markets are those markets where the consumers use the products for their daily life, but the industrial markets are those markets where generally the sub parts and the assemblies are taken to the industries for the usage. And this is a very big market in terms where the industries are using the raw material and the semi-finished goods and other accessories also in terms of inventory to build up the finished goods, and then these goods are assembled to give to the final consumers. So, according to the needs, we have different kinds of advertising. The consumer advertising basically relates to the kind of advertising in terms where the retail advertising becomes important, and the kind of the direct advertising in terms to the mass media becomes important. So, when you take up this kind of impact, the retail advertising and the advertising through the distribution channel or through the mass media relates to a direct contact with the customer. The contact has to be with the defined level of the customer, and if genuinely the target audiences are not related, the advertising expenditures will go waste. See, we cannot market a kind of a product which is used by males, or you can target to the female audiences. The total efforts will be lost. Now, when you take up the industrial markets, the kind of the impact which you have to build up relates to is a larger investment. Now, this advertising, if it is taken through broadcast media in terms of TV, radio or print media, would genuinely waste lot of money, because the users of these products are few industries and few specialized people who are in the market and who have to be contacted through the brochures or through the trade journals. So, we have a different approach when we relate to the industrial marketing. This is related to the trade advertising, to the professional advertising and to the farm advertising. Now, trade advertising basically relates to the trade associations and to the forums where the industrial associations and the people related to particular profession gather together. Here these associations in terms where organize their meetings in form of conferences and seminars do put a kind of a impact in building the directories, the yellow pages directories, and through mobile and internet we can contact these kinds of audiences. The professional advertising relates to the professional market ethics where the services of highly specialized caliber are required by few specialized groups of people. The farm advertising basically relates to the agriculture production where the farmers become important and how seeds have to be marketed in order, where the knowledge has to be updated in terms of hybridization and quality. So, we have the kind of the impact where we relate to a particular segment. If this advertising is taken to the consumers, lot of money will be wasted, and it is a useless effort to convince the consumers because the consumers are not going to use these products. So before we implement the marketing strategy in terms of advertising, we have to relate to the kind of the impact which is created in terms of the product price, the kind of the distribution and the communication system taken up into a kind of an interactive value. The product element becomes important in advertising. Virtually every product has to be defined and it has to be specialized in terms to the group of people who are using. The kind of the mass merchandising consumer products have to be packaged in such a way that the consumer can read and recall the things related to the product. The insurance and the kind of the tax services and the banking services have to be genuinely made to be learned to the consumers in an easy language where the kind of the trust and faith has to be established. So it depends on the type of the advertising which you are taken related to a particular service, which is simple or complex, defines the kind of the basic impact of the advertising value. The technical and the scientific products which are high tech oriented require complex advertising and a kind of a complex learning process where you have the specialized media to make people learn about the kind of the basic demonstrations. So the price element also impacts this aspect of the product, which could be simple, mass oriented, or could be specialized. The price does connect the audiences in terms where the advertising builds a kind of a contact with the total market. It is important that we regulate the prices, and when we regulate the prices, we try to govern a kind of a impact where the kind of the regular price line advertising becomes important and the image advertising becomes important. Now the regular price line advertising relates to the kind of the impact where you have the discounts and the basic premiums and the incentives offered to sell the product. But the image advertising basically is a kind of a long-term, softly promoted program which tries to create a vision for the company not only for 1 or 2 years, but it is for the long term. The price line advertising is an aggressive kind of promotion program where we try to cash on the kinds of the benefits in terms to build up for the audiences where profits become important. But when you build on image advertising, it could be a losses for the first few years of the companies, and then only after few years you can earn a kind of a brand and image where you cultivate the loyalty of the customers, and it is a kind of a soft promotional program which relates to the kind of the soft values of the human interaction. Advertising at the impact of the local distribution channel also impacts the type and the form where you have the global markets and the regional markets. When global advertising becomes important, it is generally the multinational companies who try to cater to the various markets, and here the standardization of ads has to be impacted with the reference to the product and the usage standards. The global advertising basically sends consistent messages around the world relating to all the regions of the world. It is the international trends which are genuinely assessed, and the kind of the international interaction has to be done where the messages have to be tailored according to the foreign markets. The national advertising basically relates to the country's cause and issues. It basically relates to the kind of the cultures and the kind of the basic trends happening into the local market and the kind of the state and the regional markets. Companies market in several regions. So according to the basic traditions, these advertising have to take the shape. Then you have the kind of the regional ads which are promoted on the part where the companies are multi-domestic. Multi-domestic, that is, they are only catering to few markets. Businesses and retailers try to operate in these kinds of small trading areas so as to cash on to the profit. Now the communication element with the global, the national, the regional and the local advertising forms becomes important because messages have to be planned in such a way that they become compatible with the kind of the region covered. You have to get the support from the audiences in terms where they understand and they accept. The kind of the communication elements which puts an impact on advertising relates to building up a kind of a public relation with the consumers. They try to promote the kind of the sales effort, try to build up the collateral markets, and try to give an impact in terms of the remembrance. The global advertising or the local advertising at any cost relates to the kind of the culture. Culture becomes important because this culture shapes the creative strategy. It is the kind of the adoption in terms of the norms, in terms of the religion and in terms of the tradition. The kind of the scale of economies relate to the kind of the consistent image building in terms where the global consumer segments have a kind of a creative taste and a desire. These passions have to be satisfied by the advertisers so as to build up the kind of the returns where the economies of scales are crystallized. We have the kind of the advertisement which has the ability to control the message and use the mass communication media, where you try to direct the kind of the audience's emotions in order to build a positive attitude. It's not only consumers or traders or people who are institutions using advertising, but advertising is used by politicians and the government also. And when the campaign is built up at the electional level, we have the mass media, we have the mass public and the politicians who try to genuinely build a kind of an image into the market. The basic political ads which are shaped take a kind of a form where you have the negative ads, you have the positive ads, then you have the contrast ads. The ads could be issue based or it could be image based. Then you could have the humor based ads also. But any kind of ads, they are taken through the forms of advertising in terms where you relate to the television, radio, print, direct mails, you have the billboards, you have the push polling, you have games, you have the kind of the info commercials, and then you have the websites where the messages are taken. The kind of the induced impact which is created in terms of election tries to build a kind of impact into the market, where the impacts of party and the kind of the political philosophy is taken to the audiences. The limited impacts have to be created in a sensitive way, where you have to have a kind of impact in terms to create the candidate's identity, to genuinely take the policy decisions to the people, and to build a kind of a personal and a political connection with the audiences. Now when we take up the negative ads, they are very risky, but still sometimes it is a kind of an impact where you have to portray feelings related to jealousy, or feelings related to negative desires, or feelings related to criticisms which can generally shape the audience ethics. The negative ads basically relate to the perceptions that the politicians are unresponsible in few areas in terms of comparison. It is criticism and it is the less supportive public mood. So here if the impact is this, the turnout will be low. But if the negative ads are taken up in a creative way to build a kind of information and anxiety and try to build a stake into the market, they can turn into a high turnout. Negative ads have to be carefully built up, because any kind of criticism or any statement which hurts the feeling of the people would break the image of the politician, or even if it is government or a country or an institution, the images will be shattered. If you built it in a designer way, if you built in a creative way, it is people will come to you. Advertising, which is basically interactive, basically relates to the kind of the relevance which is created in terms of impact. Google as a search machine basically offers you the natural results and the paid results according to the capacity and the want of the audiences. The banner ads and the kind of the sponsorship which is given to this media generally creates a kind of a major vision and an issue for the audiences related to the particular topics. These ads basically have the opportunities in terms to build a capability where the targeted kind of the audiences have a kind of a content and a kind of a designing impact. The kind of the subscriptions and the blogs and the basic impact create a kind of a value. The rich media basically relates to the kind of the mobile advertising. This is the new generation of advertising where we have the kind of the impacts in terms where the revenues through these advertising is increasing. The kind of the impact in the next few years and the next generation which is empowered by the mobiles is going to increase. The channels created by the Microsoft and the Thumb Dance will create more kind of impact in terms of interaction, where the lightning cast becomes imported. Here a kind of a mobile is genuinely launched where the video recordings can also be messaged, and these video recordings will play a new role and a shape to the advertising world. The advertising basically is targeted to the kind of the audiences where we have to relate to the behavioral variables, that is in terms of the search performances of the audiences. What are the basic issues the audiences are searching? What are the kinds of the products they are purchasing? And what are the kind of the interest areas where they are reading and related? The demographic issues would relate to the kind of the geography, that is the locations, the day and the night issues, the genders and the kind of the work and the home locations become important. The technical variables related to this connection would relate to the kind of the connection speed, the browser and the ISP domain, and the kind of the authorization and authentication. So these issues will play an important role in deciding the advertising quality and impact. We here have shown you the kind of the impact which advertising creates, whatever form of advertising or whatever type of advertising is, it has an impact in terms of increased sales and a kind of increased remembrance power. This enhances the value of relation of the customer with the company. Here on the y-axis we have the sales and on the x-axis we have the time. Now the point of advertising as a promotion is shown where the sales with time increase. Then with time you have a period of promotion. It is only a particular time where the promotion enhances the sale. See, in the first model, the period of advertising impacted increases the sales, and if advertising stops, this will fall down. But in the second model, we have shown you the kind of the impact where after advertising the impact is maintained. But what is the ideal form? Sales increase then remain at higher level. That is when you built up the image through the kind of the advertising and the sales promotion. This is the third model where the promotional period would enhance the sales volume and would remain at a kind of a impactful and a constant returns if it is built up with a quality way. So this is the kind of the impact we want from the audiences, that advertising has to work on the basis where the image has to be built up, where the kind of the brand has to be built up, and a kind of equity has to be shaped up in the market, where the kind of the investment in terms of money would give high returns as sales volumes added to the companies. The kind of the networks which we built and the kind of the ads which we built are carried through the kind of the desktop and through the mobiles. These gadgets are important in terms of empowering people and shaping the society next generation. The kind of the basic appeals related to the basic programs related to these kinds of impact relate to the kind of the adware and the spyware. Now these are the technical softwares which genuinely relate to the quality of the ad. Adware programs bundle with the other downloaded software that monitor consumers' web browsing and serve the ad bases on online habits are important. And spyware is the adware that tracks the user's personal information and passes to the third parties. So we have to protect the kind of the internet security in terms where we have the kind of the basic security given in terms to build the kind of the antivirus systems and the kind of the learning abilities of the audiences to enhance the kind of the confidentiality of the audience personal data. So in any case, the electronic revolution has shaped the advertising world. It has increased the dangers, it has increased the kinds of the appeals, and it has increased the kind of interaction. In any case, the positive impacts overvalue the kind of the basic dangers related to the interactive advertising modes. So we try to calculate on these issues. The generations have to enhance the value in terms of relation through the interactions, and a generation without these gadgets would be a kind of a dead person who's genuinely cut off from the world. The world has been converted into a global electronic village where the kind of the communication with all the parts of the world is controlled through the audience's click of mouse. I hope the students must have understood the various forms of advertising and the types of advertising governing the human sustenance. Thank you, students.